detail with that for you. Here's how we look at skip steps when planets are square the nodes. Here in this example, we start with a planet. I only have one up for you, Pluto at 16 Virgo. We go clockwise, which is reversing through the houses or the zodiac. In this example, the nodes are at 22. The nodes are applying squares to Pluto. If the nodes were at 16 degrees Gemini Sag, it'd be an exact square. If the nodes were at 12, it'd be a separating square. So here's your visual on the nodes applying squares. If a planet is, if the nodes are applying squares to a planet, the skip steps are increasing and magnifying. It's the frustration of an applying aspect. If it's exact, it is intensified and highlighted, and that planet wants to solve that issue of jumping back and forth between those nodes. If it is separating squares, it means there could be a prior life of that planet square the nodes, and we've been working on it already, and it can be a little easier to learn how to go into resolving those skip steps, okay? But this would be the node that we would be concentrating on to understand the issues here, and the arrested development with the planet. It all gets resolved and understood in this example through the North Node. Now, we're not going to go into the details of signs and houses with this case. This is just the math, okay? This is a visual on the math. We are literally going to have 11 classes because I'm going to include Chiron. So we're going to go through every single one of those planets with different examples. Sometimes the resolution node will be North Node. Sometimes the resolution node would be South Node. In this example, flip the nodes around. If the South Node was here, this would be the resolution node, and the South Node would be the resolution node. It can go either way. It just depends on any specific chart. Now, just for the sake of this class, I wanted to include the cycle of phases and aspects as I have drawn it up. This originated with Dane Rudier, to the best of our knowledge, with his book, The Lunation Cycle. And he went through the 8 phases of the sun and the moon. And of course, as you can see here, we go from 0 to 90, 180, all the way back to 360 again. So this is doing aspects the way we do it from planet to planet. And this is how we look at the natural zodiac as we go from Aries to Pisces, from 1st to 12 houses, but this is dividing the circle by 8 instead of 12. And so in Jeffrey Green's teachings, he took what Dane Rudier had put out in his book, The Lunation Cycle, and Jeffrey expanded it to aspects in general between all the planets. And you would take the faster moving planet, compare it to the slower moving planet. I don't have that slide in here. I'll have it in next month. I had to redo it, and my graphics artist didn't, I didn't have time for him to get that done for me. So we'll take up on that a little more in next month's class. And so that's the material that I wanted to cover. I'm going to move into chart example from here on. And so before I do, I'd like to just check in and see if anybody has questions on the basic archetypes and theory that I've covered here. If not, we'll move on. And I would like to check in with Leroy and see if our volunteer is
Just a little
on the
confusion before
class.
you move on, Kim.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little confusion on why Jeff didn't see sun square the nodes as a skip step. Uh, some people, aren't exactly sure where we got that. Of course, my response on the Q&A board was simply because we live in a heliocentric galaxy, and
Mm-hmm.
the integrative capacity of the sun, everything circles around it. That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of how I reconciled it in my own studies. Were we clear on that, or did you want to have any additional comments on that, please?
Yes, yes. And what Jeffrey's teachings would espouse is point one. You're correct, Leroy. As we said earlier, the sun is the center of the solar system. And if we took the sun out of the solar system, all life would cease to exist. So yes, it is a heliocentric based system that we live in. We observe it geocentric from our Earth perspective. So we think we're the center of the universe here on planet Earth, but it's the sun that is the center of the solar system, and it is such a strength. Again, just simplify it back to the basics of astrology. We don't discover astrology through our Venus. We know it through sun sign. That's how old astrology is, and that's how basic it goes back to. Our history, observe, correlate with astrology, came through observing those 12 constellations around the circle for tens of thousands of years. The second point that Jeffrey's teachings would say is he wouldn't say there are no skip steps. He'd say they may or may not exist. There can be some skip steps in that creative self-actualization. There can be some skip steps when planets are square the nodes. The strength of life force coming through the sun means that most of us, one way or another, would identify those skip steps and solve them, whether we knew what the resolution node was via the language of astrology or not. So it was an observe, correlate situation, basically what he was saying. Clarify? More questions?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, do we have our volunteer on, Leroy? If our volunteer's here and Leroy's in process of unmuting, you're welcome to just speak up. Can you hear me now as you're getting unmuted?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hello, sweetie.
Okay. Hi.
Hi, thank you for showing up.
Oh, no, no problem.
And so I'm just going to very quickly for the tape, just give them your birth data, September 25th, 1964, 8:39 p.m. in Washington, D.C. You relate to yourself having sun in the 6th house. And when I did all of the all the different houses, I came up with Placidus. Is that what you usually use?
Yes.
Okay. I have first spirituated. You are in a long-term live-in relationship. I couldn't remember if you had 1 or 2 sons.
Yes, 2.
Okay, two adult sons, and you're a chiropractor, and you have been starting your own health and wellness metaphysical retail storefront business. And I can't remember, is that open already?
No, it's in the process.
You're in process of just really moving and expanding into that metaphysical world.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So let me now just do some of just the basics of describing what we're looking at here, and then we'll start in with some of your feedback as you've been listening to class. And so again, this is an example of sun square the nodes. The sun here is about 3 degrees Libra. It is in the 6th house. Libra is intercepted in the 6th house. If we start with the sun and move in that clockwise manner through the houses, through the zodiac to see which node we come to, we're going to come to the north node. This is going to be the resolution node. The north node is about 27 degrees Gemini. It is in the 2nd house. And as we see that RX right here, this is someone who was born with the nodes retrograde. Now this means the south node is going to be over here at about 27 degrees Sagittarius and in the 8th house. Now, as we start to work with this interpretation, and we're working with the nodes and we're working with any planet square the nodes, that does not mean we get to skip the soul. I want to bring in, we'll concentrate on the planet square the nodes, but we're going to try and bring the whole chart in as we're working here. And so in this situation, we have the Pluto Virgo generation. Pluto is in the 5th house, which is the Leo house. So this already is going to show us, while Pluto generation is Virgo, this is a Leo soul. Leo, 5th house, Pluto soul. The sun rules Pluto by house. So that sun square the nodes is also going to be impacted here by a 5th house Pluto. And as you can see here, we have the stellium. This is someone who was born in 64. The Uranus-Pluto conjunctions were 65, 3 of them. So Uranus is balsamic Pluto, Mercury, communications, ruler of Virgo, ruler of the north node by sign is new phase Pluto. So it's involved here. So this is a very strong stellium right here. So this is going to come in and be part of this sun square the nodes. Ruler of the south node by house is the soul itself. There's another signature that the soul itself is going to be involved with sun square the nodes, whether we perceive skip steps or not. Ruler of south node by sign is Jupiter over here, 1st house, 26 Taurus retrograde, new phase that moon. Moon gets pulled into the nodal axis as well with this ruler conjunct it. And then we have also the north node ruler by house is Venus down here in the 4th house, the moon's house of rulership, in Leo, which is ruled by the sun, and in, it's just past a conjunction, so it's new phase, this Mars in Leo and the 4th house as well. Now, there can be some other things that are going on here. What I would like to do, though, is open it up to our volunteer as she was listening to me go through these archetypes and see if there were specific things that just popped into your consciousness as we were going through these archetypes of the sun and the nodes. In other words, I'd like to hear from you first as to what's bubbling over for you. And I will make sure that I bring in any teaching aspects that I see germane to the picture. I will also bring in any interpretations that I feel are valid and necessary. I will also say one more thing. This volunteer had a reading with me last week, which is how she became the volunteer. And I apologize, I'm not going to remember anything I said. So please, if something from last week stuck out for you, please share.
Okay, well, thank you. I think listening to when you were lecturing, a lot of things stuck out in terms of I didn't really realize how Leonian I was until I started listening to some of the descriptions about the sun. And, you know, one thing I think stands out is for me, I've had a particularly dramatic life. And I've always said it's not my fault. Somehow this drama just follows me, and I just try to balance everything, and it never seems to work out right. But I think also I've had a lot of action in my life with the fifth house, lovers, children, creative self-actualization. I maybe listening to you, I'm pulling in some of that stuff on a subconscious level so I can learn about who I am. I've been very reticent my whole life being in the public. You know, I was a very shy person growing up. I didn't really want to be shown in that 11th house. And maybe that's part of the Virgo-ness of my fifth house as well. But I've always been very shy about exposing myself in pictures and letting people see who I am. Although when I get in front of the public to speak and give lectures, you know, again, that Virgo stellium on health, being a chiropractor, I rock. You know, I recognize my ability to be able to lecture very eloquently to a group of 200 people. So I'm not sure, maybe I am moving into the 11th house, you know, polarity. And what else? There was something else that you were saying. I think the other thing is growing up, you know, my parents, I had a Hispanic father, didn't show a lot of love, didn't really, kind of an angry man, bad temper, didn't really point out, you know, look at any of his 3 children for anything, you know, special. And so maybe that was that area of my life where you do have these karma with lovers that you pull in, and you're trying to self-actualize yourself. Look at me, look at me, look at who I am, that you didn't get as a child. And then I think another thing, in my lifetime, I've had 2 love triangles, very difficult situations in my life. But that particularly stuck out because those were very hard times to get through. So yeah, there was a lot that you said that made a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. And now I'm at a time in my life where I am, you know, so much of my life has been involved in being immersed in relationships of all kinds. If it's not a romantic relationship, there's been a lot of drama with children relationship and family relationship. And now at this stage of my life, I'm really kind of coming into my own, where I'm finding that relationships are okay, but I don't really need it. You know, it's not what my main focus is, more about rising up spiritually and my profession.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you. That was very nice and succinct. Mm-hmm. Sun square the notes, getting your speaking skills going.
Yes, exactly.
So let me just give some feedback on that, okay? First of all, with that, I made a couple of notes here, and so not really recognizing how Leonian you were, and you know, not my fault. That could be, you know, one of the possibilities of Sun square the nodes and coming through both Libra and the 6th house, because, you know, both of those archetypes are getting orientated to the other, and they come off of that Leo in the 5th and the natural zodiac. So, you know, they're in a process of tempering all that 5th house stellium. But when I heard you say that, I thought, oh, Sun square the nodes. I don't recognize how much Leo I have in my chart. And so there is something that, let's go to this North node then as a resolution node. As you hear that, as you take the time alone to ponder and reflect some of the feedback that comes at you from other people, when you don't recognize ruler Mercury and Sun square the node, sometimes how forceful you are. You know, this is what I'm seeing here is this is that quiet time for you to recognize this. And this also then will relate back to this South node in Sag and 8th. This is another signature of being somewhat of a powerhouse sometimes. You know, ruler Jupiter is 1st house. It knows how to bust out and speak up when you're being attacked, or you're standing up for truth, or what's right and fair for all concerned. So just looking at the south node coming off of this Pluto in general, and this stellium here that gets dragged into the 5th house Pluto, then coming through this ego of the past, you have lifetimes where you've either been in power, or you've had that ability to speak up and raise your voice, compared to lifetimes where, if you look at this Gemini 2nd house, sometimes you close down your voice, sometimes you go within, and you have to hear that inner voice sometimes when this isn't getting anywhere in trying to be a forceful 8th house with, listen to me and we'll figure it out, listen to me and I'll help you understand. And so this is that part of the sun then that is going, oh, I do have more strength in Leo than I recognize. So there might be some of that skipped energy and integrating how much there is to you and personality, creativity, sun. And then the next thing is that you said, however, even though as a Pluto Virgo, the shyness that can still be here along with the life force and will of the 5th house, when you do get on the stage, you do have that ability to then move the voice. And when it comes to 6th house issues of health and wellness, you rock, you can speak. So then that shows me that you don't necessarily have skip steps there, because what are you communicating here with health and wellness through that sun to this north node? How to survive. What is health and wellness but the ability to actually have the survival ability, which is 2nd house here on planet Earth. And you are showing them the many ways, Gemini, that we can do that. And you're integrating all of the health and wellness modalities and what works best for each person to survive and flourish, which is, bringing in the Taurus and the Libra, all of those Venus archetypes that the ruler of the 2nd house works with. And then, of course, the third thing, that not to skip past the parent thing, because I think you explained dad and the emotional displacements, projections onto lovers earlier. You did that. You described that very well. The last thing that I wanted to say is you mentioned the 2 love triangles and how difficult they were, and probably what a reflection back to yourself that they were, as a 5th house Pluto was learning objectivity. And we haven't brought in yet Chiron here at about 16 Pisces retrograde, sitting on the Pluto polarity point, and some of the woundedness that would come through relationships and love affairs as you're really trying to heal self, to then be able to be objective in healing yourself. Chiron in general on the evolutionary intent, I want to heal myself and I want to be the healer. And how best do I go about it in ways that are fulfilling for others, society? So you've got the whole modality of healing yourself to then help heal others. But the woundedness of the love triangles, just Sun and Libra, square the nodes in the 2nd, 8th, and bringing up all that woundedness that came from family of origin, maybe multiple lifetimes, multiple love triangles of multiple lifetimes. It did serve, I'm going to assume, those love triangles really serve to throw you in upon yourself, to again do that Gemini reflection, see it from multiple viewpoints, to then take you to the next level of your own self-reliance, hopefully resolving that issue of self-love on some of the deepest levels possible. Would you say that's kind of been the end result of coming through the love triangles?
Absolutely. Oh, for me to ever be as eloquent as you are with astrology, I really look forward to that day. But yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it makes you go inward, and you see two people's hearts breaking because of you, and your heart's breaking because of them, and it absolutely makes you question your existence and your survival and everything about that. No question.
Mm-hmm. And let me just point out in a generic viewpoint for everyone, is when it comes to Sun, Leo, and the 5th house and the love triangles, the person who has the Sun in question can be the one seeking out the triangle. However, it can be the flip as well. It can be the partner seeking out the triangle. Either way, it just serves as a wake up to all of those archetypes of self-love, self-acknowledgement we talked about, whether the person in question did it or the partner did it. Both ways, it still shakes things up for the person whose Sun or Leo or 5th house is involved. Volunteer, any questions you have, anything you can think of that we haven't spoke up to?
No, I don't think so. I think you've done a good job at covering it all. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's check in with our listeners. Leroy, do we have any questions coming from the board, or any archetypes that we perhaps didn't flesh out that you're looking at the chart? Let's just take a moment here.
No questions coming in from the board. I'm looking for raised hands here, but nope. And just a few interactions on the Q&A panel, but I think we're complete there.
Mm-hmm. Anything that you see, Sun in Leo, Pluto in Leo, Mr. all kinds of planets in Leo?
Well, one of the discussions on the board for me kind of brought this into, I guess, consciousness for me, was having known this chart example, from several years ago, just meeting her, and you get these distinct intuitive expressions or intuitive hits on people. We all do, or else we wouldn't be in this business, I guess. I just immediately saw her as a reflection of my Leo energy. Oh, okay, this one, she's there for the real deal. She's in it to win it. She's a force to be reckoned with. And yet, what I'm getting with this Sun square the nodes is there can almost be this unconscious aspect to Sun square the nodes. You become aware of it through other means, i.e., other aspects of the chart, the love triangles, the overriding Virgo, or whatever is going on. But for me, that's kind of a hit that I always had with this chart. Was in meeting her, it was, to me, it was a powerhouse that was standing in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting, because a lot of people will say that. And I think, your perception just, of yourself is never what others see. Mm-hmm. So I really try to express, I think, that Libran quality. I'm always trying to be fair and balanced, but most people don't describe me as that. And so I'm guessing there must be more of that Sagittarian 8th house South node that comes through. And in my mind's eye, I'm thinking I'm being fair, but I'm